You're driving down a lonely road in the middle of the night, surrounded by dense, endless woods. The trees stretch high above, blocking out the moonlight, and the only sound is the steady hum of your engine. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you see movement. A shadow, tall, thin, watching. You turn your head, but it's gone. New Hampshire is full of stories like this. Stories of people who saw something they couldn't explain. A woman accused of witchcraft who might still wander the roads of Hampton. A cursed mountain where a dying chief's last words still echo. A creature in the northern woods that vanishes the moment you look at it. Some of these tales go back centuries, whispered around campfires and passed down through generations. Others are more recent, strange encounters that happened to people who were certain they were alone until they weren't. Are these just old myths, or is something still out there, hiding in the dark corners of the state? You might want to leave the lights on, because once you hear these stories, you'll never look at New Hampshire the same way again. Witch of Hampton, Curse of Goody Cole. It always starts the same way. A lone traveler on a dark road. The wind howling through the trees. A figure standing by the roadside, barely visible in the dim moonlight. She's old, bent, wrapped in a tattered cloak. But when the traveler gets closer, she vanishes. For centuries, people in Hampton have spoken of Goody Cole, the woman no one wanted, the woman they feared, and the woman they never really got rid of. Eunice Goody Cole lived in Hampton in the 1600s, a time when whispers could ruin lives. She was poor, she was strange, and worst of all, she had no one to defend her. When bad luck struck, when crops failed, cattle died, or a child fell sick, the town always had the same answer. It must be Goody Cole. The first time they accused her of witchcraft, they locked her away in chains. Years later, they let her out, but no one welcomed her home. They ignored her, spat at her, and left her to starve. When she finally died, the townspeople weren't taking any chances. Some say they buried her in an unmarked grave. Others say they drove a wooden stake through her heart, making sure she'd never return. But maybe it didn't work. Strange things have happened in Hampton over the years. People have reported seeing a hunched figure near the old roads, disappearing when approached. Sudden storms have swept in, sinking boats and flooding fields. And when you stand near the place where Goody's shack once stood, some say you can still hear her voice in the wind. Maybe it's just a legend. Maybe it's nothing. But if you ever find yourself walking alone in Hampton at night, and you feel something watching you from the trees, don't stop. Keep moving. And whatever you do, don't listen to the whispers. Curse of Chief Chocorua. Death that echoes through the mountains. There's a reason Mount Chocorua feels different. Hikers talk about the silence, the kind that presses against your ears, thick and heavy as if the trees are holding their breath. The wind moves strangely up there, twisting through the peaks like a voice calling your name. And sometimes people swear they hear it, the faint echo of a dying man's curse. This is the mountain named after Chief Chocorua, a Native American leader who lived in New Hampshire in the early 1700s. His story isn't written in stone, but the legend has been whispered for generations. And like all the best ghost stories, it begins with a terrible betrayal. The way people tell it, Chocorua once had peace with the settlers. He trusted them enough to leave his young son in their care while he traveled. But when he returned, his child was gone, dead, they said, from an illness. Chocorua didn't believe it. He saw it as murder, an unforgivable crime. So he took his revenge, killing members of the settlers' family before disappearing into the mountains. But they followed him. The settlers hunted Chocorua like an animal, chasing him to the peak of the mountain that now bears his name. Trapped at the edge of a sheer cliff, he had no escape. But before he fell, He turned to face his pursuers and shouted his final words. He cursed them, the land, their people, their future. And then he leaped. Years passed, but the curse never faded. Settlers who tried to live near the mountains suffered hardship after hardship. Crops withered. Livestock died without reason. People fell ill, some vanishing into the woods, never to return. Even today, strange accidents happen on the mountain. Falls that shouldn't have happened. Sudden storms. Unexplained injuries. Some say it's bad luck. Some say it's just a story. But when you stand at the peak of Mount Chocorua, when the wind whips past you like a whisper from the past, you might start to wonder, was the chief's last breath just words or something more? Wood Devils of Coös County. Shadows in the trees. The forests of Coös County are different. They stretch for miles, thick with towering pines that block out the sun, their branches packed so tightly together that the deeper you go, the harder it is to see. Even in daylight, something about these woods feels wrong. Hunters say it's the silence. 1 minute, the forest hums with life, birds chirping, twigs snapping underfoot. Then, without warning, everything stops. No wind, no movement, just an eerie, unnatural stillness, as if the whole forest is waiting. That's when people see them. Tall, thin figures move between the trees, blending into the trunks like shadows that aren't supposed to be there. Some call them the Wood Devils. Others refuse to call them anything at all. Stories about them go back generations. In the 1800s, lumberjacks working deep in the woods would catch glimpses of something watching them. Tall creatures covered in fur, moving too quickly to be human, but too quiet to be a bear. Whenever someone tried to get a closer look, the figure would dart behind a tree, disappearing without a sound. Even today, people still report sightings. Hikers have come back with wild stories about being followed. Hearing footsteps that stopped when they stopped, seeing flashes of gray for slipping behind the trees. Some claim they felt something watching them from just beyond the tree line, but when they turned to look, there was nothing there. No bodies have ever been found. No tracks. No proof. Skeptics say it's a trick of the light, a case of nerves getting the best of people alone in the woods. But those who've seen them swear they weren't imagining things. So if you ever find yourself walking alone in the forests of Coös County and the woods go silent, don't stop. Don't turn around, because if the Wood Devils are watching, you won't see them until they want you to. Devil Monkeys of Danville. Creatures in the night. It started with a scream, not a normal scream, something high-pitched, guttural, and completely unnatural. It echoed through the trees on a quiet night in Danville, making the hair on the back of people's necks stand up. Then came the sightings. A group of teenagers driving down a rural road saw something sprint across the pavement, too fast, too long-limbed to be anything normal. It had dark, bristling fur, glowing eyes, and arms that stretched unnaturally close to the ground. The driver slammed on the brakes, but by the time they got out to look, the thing was gone. That same night, a family walking their dog spotted something clinging to a tree. It had sharp claws dug into the bark, its long, ape-like limbs wrapped tightly around the trunk. When it turned its head, they saw its teeth, long, jagged, and wrong. Then, it screeched and disappeared into the darkness. More reports followed. People claimed they saw creatures running along the tree line, keeping pace with their cars. A man swore he heard scratching at his shed late at night, but when he went outside, nothing was there, except deep claw marks running down the wooden door. Locals started calling them the Devil Monkeys. Where did they come from? No one knows. Some believe they escaped from an illegal exotic pet collection. Others think they've always been here, hiding in the deepest parts of the woods, only surfacing when food runs low. The most chilling theory? They aren't animals at all, but something older, something that was never meant to be seen. Then, Just as suddenly as the sightings began, they stopped. No more screeches in the night. No more glowing eyes lurking in the darkness. No proof they were ever there. But if you find yourself driving through Danville on a lonely night, keep your eyes on the trees. And if you hear something moving just beyond your headlights, don't stop to find out what it is. Haunting of Chase House. Ghost that won't leave. Some houses never feel empty, even when no one's inside. The Chase House in Portsmouth is one of them. Built in the late 1800s, it was once a home for orphan children. A place that was supposed to offer shelter, safety, and a fresh start. But not every child found peace within its walls. There's one story people whisper more than any other. The tale of the girl who never left. No one remembers her name, but the story always ends the same way. A young girl, alone and hopeless, ended her life inside the house. Some say she hanged herself in her small bedroom. Others claim she threw herself from the second-floor window. Either way, the result was the same. The house kept her. Strange things started happening not long after. Staff reported hearing soft footsteps at night when the halls were supposed to be empty. Doors locked and unlocked by themselves. Ceiling fans spun without power. Some claimed they heard quiet sobbing from the upstairs rooms, but when they checked, no one was there. And then there were the sightings. More than one person has described seeing a girl in a white nightgown standing at the top of the staircase, staring. Her face is pale, her expression blank, her eyes dark and distant. When someone calls out to her, she never speaks. She just turns and disappears into the shadows. The Chase House has changed over the years. New owners, new paint, new purpose. But some believe the past lingers in the walls. And if you ever step inside and feel a sudden chill, or hear soft footsteps following you down the hall, you might not be as alone as you think. Cocheco Falls Millworks Fire. Echoes in the ashes. The mills of Dover were once alive, filled with the steady hum of machines, the clatter of spinning looms, and the voices of workers calling over the noise. The Cocheco Manufacturing Company stood at the heart of it all, a giant of industry that powered the town's economy for decades. But some say it never truly went silent, especially at night. The fire started suddenly. No warning, no chance to stop it before the flames spread. The upper floors became a death trap as workers scrambled for any way out. Smoke poured from shattered windows, casting eerie shadows on the river below. Some tried to run, and others leaped from the windows, hoping to survive the fall. The fire raged on until nothing was left but charred beams and the weight of lives lost. The factory was rebuilt. Life moved on, but strange things started happening inside the remaining buildings. Workers whispered about hearing voices in empty rooms. Some reported the smell of smoke creeping through the hallways, even though no fire had burned for years. A few swore they saw figures walking between the old machines, shadowy outlines that flickered and disappeared when they looked directly at them. At night, the stories get worse. Some say they've heard the faint sound of machines running, long after the last factory closed. Looms clicking, footsteps pacing the upper floors, doors slamming when no one is there. A few people have felt something brush past them in the dark, cold, unseen hands that vanish the moment they turn around. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's the old pipes groaning in the walls. Or maybe the people who died in the fire never left. If you ever find yourself near the old mills of Dover, listen closely. Because sometimes, if the night is quiet enough, you can still hear the sound of work that never really stops. Stone-throwing devil of Great Island. House under attack. It started with a single rock. A small stone tossed against the side of George Walton's Tavern in Great Island, now Newcastle. One quiet evening in 1682. He ignored it until another hit, then another. Soon, stones rained down from nowhere, slamming against walls, shattering windows, and crashing onto the roof. But no one was there. At first, Walton thought he had enemies. He wasn't well-liked. Some people resented his wealth, his land, and his attitude. But when he rushed outside with a musket, ready to catch the culprit, the street was empty. The stones kept flying, some from angles that no person could have thrown by hand. It wasn't just the stones. Inside, objects moved on their own. Furniture slid across the floor. Candles flickered and died without wind. The people inside the tavern spoke in hushed voices, too afraid to admit what they feared most. Witchcraft. New England was a place where the supernatural was taken seriously. A townsperson who made the wrong enemy could find themselves accused of working with dark forces. Some believed Walton had angered a witch, someone who had cursed him, sending unseen hands to torment him in his own home. Others thought he had disturbed an ancient force that wanted him gone. Days passed, but the attacks didn't stop. People began avoiding the tavern, afraid they'd be struck next. Eventually, the activity faded, the stones stopped, and life went back to normal, at least for everyone else. Walton lived out his days in the same house, but those who knew him said he was never the same. Centuries later, the legend remains. Some say if you stand near where Walton's tavern once stood, you might feel it, the cold prickle on the back of your neck, the sensation of being watched. Others claim that, on certain nights, you can still hear it. A sharp crack in the distance, the sound of a rock hitting wood. And if you hear that, you might want to step back before the next one comes flying your way. Mystery Stone of Lake Winnipesaukee. Artifact without a past. It was buried deep, hidden beneath layers of earth for who knows how long. No one was supposed to find it. But in 1872, while digging near Lake Winnipesaukee, a group of workers unearthed something strange. An egg-shaped stone, dark and smooth, with intricate carvings etched into its surface. The moment they brushed away the dirt and held it in their hands, they knew it wasn't an ordinary rock. Something about it felt wrong. The stone was small, about 4 inches long, but heavy. Its surface bore markings, symbols, patterns, and the unmistakable image of a face. Stranger still, a perfectly round hole had been drilled through its center. It looked like something crafted with precision, not by nature, but by hands skilled in their work. But whose hands? No one had an answer. Experts examined the stone, trying to determine its origin. Some believed it was an ancient Native American artifact, possibly a ceremonial object or a marker of some kind. Others argued it looked too refined for tribal craftsmanship, suggesting it might have been left behind by an unknown civilization. And then came the more unsettling theories. Could it be proof of pre-Columbian visitors, explorers who arrived long before history recorded their presence? Had something, or someone, brought it to New Hampshire from far beyond its borders? And if so, why was it buried? The stone has never given up its secrets. No other artifacts like it have ever been found. No tribe has claimed it. No historian has placed it. It remains an enigma, sitting on display at the New Hampshire Historical Society, where people stare at it and wonder. Where did it come from? What did the carvings mean? And perhaps most chilling of all, was it meant to be found? Ocean-born Mary, ghost of Henniker. The house stands alone, its windows dark, its walls worn by time. The wind moves through the trees, carrying whispers no one can quite explain. Some say if you stand outside long enough, you'll see her, a tall woman with fiery red hair, watching from an upstairs window. They call her Ocean-born Mary. Her story begins on the sea in 1720 when a ship carrying Scottish immigrants was attacked by pirates. As the legend goes, the captain of the pirate crew stormed aboard, prepared to kill everyone in sight, until he heard a baby cry. Something stopped him. Instead of bloodshed, he made a deal. If the child was named Mary after his mother, he would spare the passengers. Mary grew up safe in New Hampshire, far from the dangers of the open sea. She lived a quiet life, married, raised children, and in time died like anyone else. But the legend didn't end with her death. People started saying that Mary had married the pirate captain who had once spared her life, and that they had lived together in a grand house in Henniker. Some claimed treasure was buried on the property, hidden beneath the floorboards or deep in the surrounding fields. And then there were the ghosts. For years, visitors to the so-called Oceanborn Mary house have reported strange occurrences. Rocking chairs creak when no one is sitting in them. Cold spots appear in rooms that should be warm. Some people claim to hear a woman's voice murmuring in the halls. But the most unsettling stories are about the figure in the window. They say she appears at night, standing silently, watching. Some believe she's guarding her home, protecting the treasure said to be buried somewhere nearby. Others think she's looking for something, or someone long lost to the sea. Of course, the real Mary never lived in that house. The story of her pirate husband, the hidden treasure, the hauntings, none of it can be proven. But the house is still there. The ghost is still seen. And in Henniker, Oceanborn Mary remains a name spoken in hushed tones as if she might be listening. America's Stonehenge, place out of time. Deep in the woods of Salem, New Hampshire, massive stone slabs stand in silent formation, arranged with a purpose no one fully understands. Some say it's the work of ancient Native Americans. Others claim early European explorers built it centuries before history says they arrived. A few believe something far stranger is at play. They call it America's Stonehenge. The site is a maze of stone walls, underground chambers, and massive, weathered monoliths. The most famous is the sacrificial table, a massive flat stone with a deep channel carved into its surface. Some believe it was used for ancient rituals. Others dismiss it as a simple tool for processing food. But one thing is certain, the entire site was designed with intent. The most baffling part? The stones seem to align perfectly with the sun, moon, and stars. On the solstices, the sunlight falls precisely on certain markers, just like the famous Stonehenge in England. Whoever built this place understood the movement of the heavens. But who were they? Some archaeologists say the site is only a few hundred years old, likely built by early farmers for storage. But that theory doesn't explain everything. The strange carvings, the precise astronomical alignments, the eerie feeling that settles over visitors who walk among the stones at dusk. Some claim the site is charged with energy, that compasses fail, and that electronic devices glitch when brought too close. Paranormal investigators have reported hearing whispers in the chambers and seeing shadowy figures move between the stones. Others say it's all superstition, fueled by the site's eerie beauty and the mystery that surrounds it. Who built America's Stonehenge? Was it an ancient civilization lost to history? European explorers who left no other trace? Or is the answer something even stranger, something we aren't meant to understand? The stones don't speak. They simply wait,